Warriors coming up against the Dolphins. First time ever. History to be made at Mount Smart. Let's take a look how this might play out. Hey team, welcome back to the Warriorholic. Off the back of a bloody tough loss up there in Napier last weekend. One that definitely got away from us and another one that we probably should have won. What can you say? An amazing finish, but geez, we left it a bit too late. So, you can't really think that we're robbed or anything or blame one particular person. I just think it wasn't a very good effort overall. So we're hoping for a lot better this week coming up against the Dolphins, because if we put on the same kind of performance, we could get our asses handed to us. So no real history between the clubs, obviously, to look through. So I'm just going to have a quick look at how the Dolphins have gone this year. First year in the comp, Uncle Wayne got a lot of stick over the last year about his lack of ability to close some of those big signings. Went hard on Ponga and went hard on Munster and the like, but wasn't able to get one over the line there. But what he did do is quietly acquire a very, very solid lineup of hardened veterans and a couple of guys who were just looking for a chance, either through being slightly out of form or out of favour at their club, or emerging talent that hadn't quite been able to break into first grade. And the net result was they've done extremely well and exceeded everyone's expectations. So they're going to be a very, very tough challenge for us, because they're probably one of the most consistent teams in the comp. They've had two relatively heavy losses in the sort of mid to high 30s. Similar to us, we've only had, I think, our biggest points against is 34. Neither of us have had 40 points put on us, and I think we're the only two teams in the comp who've had that so far this season. So I think it's going to be a very, very even matchup, and it's just going to come down to who fires on the day. And hopefully that home ground advantage and a few guys coming back for us might get us over the line. So let's take a quick look at the two teams' form coming into this game. So the Warriors there, 6 from 12, 50% ratio, winning ratio, and 58% for them with a 7 and 12. So, nothing in it there. I think all of our games we were in it and could have won, so it could have quite easily been, 7 or 8, even 9 wins for us. So I don't think we can read too much into that. However, the last 5 games, we're 1 from 5 and they're 3 from 5. So recent form's slightly a little in their favour there, even if they have got the hammer out again this weekend. So overall points for and against for us, we're 226 for, 236 against, slight minus for and against there, 294 and 275 against, so they're slightly in the red. And you'll see the numbers down the bottom there. Average for is 18 and 19 against. Theirs is 24 4 and 22 against. So they score a few more points than us. We concede a few less from them, so that kind of compensates for each other. It sort of leads to a very sort of even matchup. Looking at the overall completion rates, both at 80%. Tackle efficiency, 88.2 versus 87.2. Nothing in that there. Average play the ball speed there, 3.49 for us, 3.64 for them. So ever so slightly faster play the ball for us. I think overall, we'll get through these individual matchups, and you'll see throughout there's a lot of really even matchups. Again, like I said, I think it just comes down to form on the night. Has Webby been able to get the boys up and sort of firing after that sort of false start last week back there after the bye? How's Uncle Wayne got these boys up for their first road trip to Mount Smart? Righty, let's take a quick look at the matchups. Starting out with the fullback. So this is an all Kiwi matchup we've got here. Chance Nickel Clockstead up against Cody Nikarima. So last week was actually pretty interesting. I almost switched my pick to St George after I saw Cody at the back there. I really didn't expect him to go well, being such a small guy. But I decided to leave my pick with the Dolphins at the last minute, which turned out to be good, because although St George started well, they didn't finish so great. And Cody actually stepped up and had a pretty good game. So looking directly at their stats there, Chance has played 10 games now. Average running meters 188 versus 9 games for Cody Nikarima. Predominantly playing in the halves or off the bench there, 74 meters. So playing in the halves and hookers, you're never going to get the same amount of runs. Tackle efficiency, they're both pretty high there, 88.5 and 86. Tackle breaks, 44 versus 17. I think, again, that's a reflection on Cody playing a lot at hooker or at in the halves there. Line breaks, 2 versus 5. So Cody's doing pretty well there in the line breaks. And the try assists, 2 from Chance and 7 from Cody. Again, that's a reflection on playing in the halves and in the hooker role there. So What to expect from these? I guess a lot of energy from Cody, a lot of enthusiasm, but I hope we'll be peppering him with those high balls. He's got some big wingers outside him there, but he's not a big man. Hopefully, we'll be running a lot of our big guys at him. Once we get up on the line there, try and get him really involved in the game. I dare say we'll put some big hits on him, but we can't give him too much room to use that footwork in broken field there, so we'd have to come up in a pretty solid line. From Chance, we're just looking for more of the same. Absolute machine. I think he ran for 220 metres last week. Only played about 60 minutes after going off of the HIA, so expecting a huge game from him. But one thing I would like to see is a little bit more ball playing. Getting a little bit more involved there. He got a great try last weekend, and that's what I think we need. We get a lot of the hard work from him, but we just need a little bit more of that, ball playing and sort of contributing to the overall attacking, options that we've got there, because I think we've been a little bit quiet on that front over the past couple of weeks. So, look, purely on consistent effort over the whole season, I've got to give this one to Chance. He's just probably one of our top 2 or 3 players this year. On the wings, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak up against Tessie New. This is going to be a really interesting battle, actually. Tessie New's been playing extremely well. He's a very big, solid boy, quite similar to Greg Marju down here at the Knights, who we struggled with. I didn't know a huge amount of him before he actually came to the Dolphins, because I hadn't seen a huge amount of him play. I'm not a big Broncos fan, but he's actually been playing bloody well. Like I said, very, very solid runner. Tries to play a similar role to Brian Tottle with hitting the balls off the end there. So that said, our boy Dallin has been in outstanding form over the past couple of weeks after a little bit of a rough return after injury there. So 6 games for Dallin and 7 for Tessie. Average running metres, Dallin gets out with 168. He's been right up there over the past couple of weeks. And 142, versus 142 there. Tackle efficiency, Dallin's been struggling a little bit. His dropped down there to 64.5, which is a little bit concerning with Tessie New with 100%. He hasn't made a huge amount of tackles, that said. I think it's only around 20 tackles in total, but still playing it out there on the wing with no tackle misses is a pretty bloody good effort. Tackle breaks, 29 versus 17, so that's good to see Dallin making the extra tackle breaks there, almost twice as many. Line breaks, Dallin's winning that one at 6 versus 4. 5 tries versus 4. So again, very similar stats. Tessie's a bit bigger of a guy. Dallin's kind of got that high energy, high pace. Pretty hard to call, to be honest. I think I'm going to give this one a 50-50. I hope Dallin can fix up those little errors in his tackle defence there. His defence overall. If he doesn't, this could be a bit of a tough night for him, because he's one of the more difficult wings to handle here. So we'll give it 50-50 and hope our man Dallin steps up for another close to man of the match performance. On the other side, we've got Montoya up against Jermaine Asako. So just on Asako, I think he's probably close to the most improved player across the whole comp this year. Really struggling for game time. It was almost looking like he might even drift out of first grade there and drop out of the comp altogether. Uncle Wayne picks him up and just turns him around, and man, he's just absolutely on fire. We'll see in a minute, 12 tries, and it's more than a try around. So I'm really stoked for him, particularly being a Kiwi there, but it's going to put a bit of a challenger for our man Montoya this week. So 12 games each there, 168 running metres for Montoya versus 160, very, very similar. 71.6% tackle efficiency for Montoya. That took a bit of a hit in the weekend. He's normally up around the 80 mark. 85.2 there for Isako. Tackle breaks, 39 versus 49. So it's not often that Montoya's been out tackle break by his opposition. 13-9 breaks for Isako versus 9 for Montoya. So if you just look at the form, you're going to have to give this one to Isako. And I think, to be honest, Montoya's been a little bit quiet over the past few rounds. He's still been making big metres well up over 160, 170 metres. But just feels like he's not quite on that same amount of form. And I kind of wonder if that's half of it is playing outside Pompey compared to when he was playing outside Williami in the early rounds. But looking for him to really step up here, using that size and power to try and drop Isako a couple of times and make him a little bit hesitant. They're both pretty good under the high ball, so tough battle, but as I said, I'm going to give this one a slight edge to Isako based on the form he's put in through the whole season. Righty. Next up, we've got Rocco Berry coming in for his second start here. As you'll know, you've heard me in the past, I'm a big fan of Rocco, so really hoping he has another big one here. Up against Branko Lee, who's a big boy. He's coming off the back of 11 games, obviously a much more experienced player. Size-wise, I think height they're very similar, but obviously Branko's probably got about 10-15 kg on him. But I don't think Berry really struggles to deal with the bigger guys. He's got a really good legs tackle on him, which pretty much takes the size out of it. He'll have the pace and the agility on it, so it should be a pretty interesting matchup here. Average running meters there, 168. He's right up there, Branko Lee for a centre. Not too many of them averaging so far up over 100. Versus 90 for Rocco. Tackle efficiency though, Rocco slightly gets there with 92.5 versus 88.3. Tackle breaks just the 4 in his limited appearance there for Rocco. 17 for Branko, but interesting, no line breaks or no tries for Branko Lee over the whole season, so quite an interesting matchup. I'm going to try and give this one to my man Rocco purely on bias and the fact that I hope we see a little bit of confidence start to build from that regular start, getting the confidence of Webby, backing him there. And I just believe that he's got the ability to develop into, that centre partner for Roger next year. So hoping he continues to progress and, makes himself a must pick for the rest of the season. So I'll give a slight edge to my man Rocco there purely on bias. Next up, we've got Pompey versus Ewan Aiken, which is going to be a really interesting battle as well. You've got the current Warriors centre there against a guy who probably many argued should have been in the centres for the Warriors last year, but was played in the second row pretty much this whole time for us. So I've got to be honest, man, I was pretty disappointed the fact that Aiken was one of those guys who you could see he clearly didn't actually want to come and be a real Warrior and play in New Zealand. I'm sure a lot of the guys around him felt that towards the end of last season. So even though he played hard, I think he had a pretty negative impact on the culture for doing that. So I hope Pompey puts one over him this week to kind of pay him back for that. He seems like a good guy all in all, but just all of those Aussies that decided they didn't want to come and play in New Zealand pissed me off a bit. So 12 games apiece, 111 metres for Pompey, 132 there for Aiken. So both of their centres are probably one of their bigger metre eaters, whereas for us it's generally our wingers and fullback that are doing it. Tackle efficiency 85.4 versus 94.9. Again, Pompey's dropped down ever so slightly in that stat. Tackle breaks 39 versus 38. Line breaks 2 versus 5 and 3 tries apiece. Based on experience and consistency in the way he's played this year, Ewan Aiken probably gets this for me. Adam Pompey showed a great not great, I should say, like a very consistent growth curve there for a long time, but he feels like over the past couple of weeks he's kind of plateaued a little bit. And I've started to notice it's a little bit lazy efforts, particularly in the effort plays there. If he wants to get signed, as I've said before, he's really going to have to step up and take it to the next level. While he's holding a place, I think he's just holding a place. He's not basically putting his hand up and saying, I am a must-pick NRL centre, come get me. I feel like as soon as Willie Army just gets a bit of fitness under those legs, he's back in New South Wales Cup this week, I have a feeling Pompey might be the guy to drop out. So I hope he steps up. Like I said, I'm always happy for these guys to prove me wrong and actually prove that they are meant to be there. So here's hoping. He's done more than we expected this year, but I would say this is likely going to be a win taken in that confrontation there. Next up, the much anticipated, slightly quiet last week, Luke Metcalf versus Anthony Milford. So this is a really interesting battle for me. You've got one game, so obviously this season for Metcalf off the back of half a cup game there, and one pre-season. You've got Milford's only played the 5 games as well because I think he had that calf injury. So you've got a guy, I think was he Dalian or something back in the day, or $1 million player there at when he left Canberra and went to Brisbane and just never really found his form again. So Milford, he's only really come back in because of O'Sullivan getting the pec injury that's keeping him out for pretty much most of the season there. So be interesting to see how he goes. He's not the fittest guy in the world, and he's sort of really struggled to demonstrate his true creativity lately, but we seem to be pretty good at running player back or team back into form. So I hope that Metcalf they've got a better game plan around him about how and when to inject him properly. Hopefully you get him a bit more space, because we saw in the last 10 minutes last week when he finally did get a bit of front foot ball and with a bit of space to work with it, he could get really distribute well, put guys away. You saw that sharp little sprint from dummy half. I need to see a bit more of that from him this week. So, both guys sort of struggling in recent times. So I'm I'm going to call this a 50-50, but I genuinely hope that we see that next step in growth there for Metcalf and justify his place, because Tamati Martin's only a couple of, if not next round or the round after, before he comes back, and we'll be putting massive pressure on him. So let's see how that one plays out, hoping for a couple of magical plays there from Metcalf this week. Right, and this one will be an interesting one. We've got the halfbacks here. So you've got the wily veteran who's in some outstanding form, even though he struggled a little bit last week, up against the young, sort of one of the other finds of the season here in Katoa. So Katoa, coming from the Penrith system, was highly regarded, was seen as a genuine backup there. So it was a pretty big coup for Wayne to get him up there. And for a 19-year-old, from day one, he's just stepped up and absolutely delivered more than you would expect. Yeah, so at the start of the year, no one would have expected this young fella at 19 years old to be there playing 11 games, starting in first grade. It was only a slight injury there that kept him out for one game. So looking at their stats, 330 or 303 kicking metres on average for Katoa versus 575 for SJ. So SJ basically does all our kicking, and I think there's a little bit of a split between the halves here. I know O'Sullivan was doing a lot of the kicking before he got injured, so his average kicking numbers aren't that high, neither is Milford, so I think you'll probably see him do the kicking, but probably not quite the same distance as SJ, but he has got a really efficient short kicking game there. Tackle efficiency 76.7 for SJ. That's dropped down. He was right up in the 90s earlier on, so I think he's had a couple of bit of rough runs there over the past few weeks for SJ, and his numbers have dropped down a bit versus 79 there for Katoa. Try assists there, 11 for SJ versus just the 5 for Katoa. And line breaks, 10. Line break assist there, 10 for SJ and 4 for Katoa. And 2 tries versus 1. So, both contributing a lot to what their team are doing at the moment. You'd like to think SJ's experience gets him home over this one. We know how well he plays at Mount Smart. He really gets up emotionally for it. He'll be hurting off the back of that effort last week. So I'd like to see him dominate this one here, and I'd like to see us put a lot of big forward traffic at Katoa. Now, every team's done it, but it's only one way to slow him down. We've got to at least give it a go. So, yep, I think we're going to give that to SJ. Rightio, next up we get to the big boys, and some stats here that really surprised me. AFB up against Jesse Bromwich. So we've got 12 games for AFB versus 10 for Jesse Bromwich. So we look at these stats here. AFB average running at 158 with post-contact metres of 683 versus Jesse Bromwich is only averaging 105 metres with a total of 380 post-contact metres. That really surprised me. Both very sort of similarly sized guys. Both international props. I would have thought Jesse Bromwich would have been higher up there with that. Tackle efficiency 95.6 versus 91.2. Tackle breaks 41 versus 10. And 5 tries versus 1. On the stats, AFB's all over him. Not really sure why that is, because from what I've seen, Bromwich has been playing well this year, but obviously a different kind of prop there. But looking at their bench props, actually, I'll get into that a bit at the moment, but they've actually got more post-contact metres and overall metres than Bromwich, so they must be using them a lot more off the bench, and maybe he's playing a lot less minutes than AFB. And maybe they're looking to have their big props on the bench to bring on once AFB goes off. So of these two, you'd have to just say, based on recent form, I would say that behind Payne Haas, AFB is probably the second best prop in the comp at the moment, so look for him to dominate this battle. So next up, we've kind of got the two backup props here that neither of them really seem like they're genuine starting first grade props to me, and Bunty Afai against Herman SASA. To a certain extent, the stats back that up. Bunty's now 12 games and 8 games for Herman SASA this year. 76 metres average, total 266 post-contact for Bunty versus 97 average metres for SASA versus 292. So they're both a little bit underwhelming in their overall metres and their post-contact metres there. Tackle efficiency 96.5 versus 96.5. That's interesting. They're both the same there. This is something I've noticed about Bunty in the last sort of week or so, or a couple of weeks, really trying to look into him and see what it is that he's doing because of his lack of run meters. And he is definitely making a huge amount of tackles, and he's got a really high tackle efficiency we see there. So look for that to continue on. Tackle breaks 10 versus 18, tries 1 versus 0. So I think, like I said, neither of these two are like stand up and definitely pick me as a starting prop. It's interesting that the Dolphins have gone for SASA rather than a couple of their more solid props on the bench there who do get bigger meters. So be interesting to see how that rotation works. Probably only looking for both of them to play the first 20 minutes, but I'm going to call it a pretty even effort there, but hoping that Bunty steps up and has a season best game like I asked for every week. Go the Bunty. Hookers. These two guys are going to have a massive influence on this game, both playing really, really well this season. Both struggling a little bit with injuries there. Only 8 games played by Egan versus 10 by Jeremy Marshall-King. Average running meters only 49 for Egan, 61 there for Marshall, so he runs a little bit, Marshall-King. Tackle efficiency, both, well over 90% there. Try assist, just the 1 for Egan versus 8 for Marshall-King. Line break assist 2 versus 7, 4 tries versus 1. So they're both contributing in different ways. I think our tries have been scored a lot more out wide, and generally off runners off SJ with those props the edge back rails sort of coming in at a different angle, or a lot of them are from kicks out wide or tries by wingers in the corner rather than the little pop passes off the hooker there. So a different contribution. I think Marshall-King kicks a lot more and he runs a lot more and he's very, very quick. So we're going to have to be very mindful of that because often we're getting caught by those really fleet-footed dummy halves this year, or like the fleet-footed fullbacks coming into dummy half as well. So we'll have to watch him. But Egan, coming off the back of a bit of a calf strain there, hopefully it's not too bad and we get some good minutes out of him. Hopefully he even actually starts, because I'm not sure who would bring in with Lussick out with a head knock. I see that Roach is not actually named on the bench or on the starting lineup for the New South Wales Cup squad. So I don't know whether he's travelling with us. I don't know if we can bring him in because he hasn't been named in the reserves or anything. But concerning we don't have a genuine hooker back up there with a guy coming off the back of a calf strain. That said, I'm looking for him to have a big contribution and control that ruck a lot more. Going to say it again, I'd really like to see a little bit of kicking from him out of dummy half there, particularly those 40-20s. So, I'm going to call this one close, but I'm going to give the edge to Marshall-King at the moment, purely on the fact that Egan's struggling to get through the game. So hopefully this is a turning point in his season. He can stop those head knocks and the little niggles and play out a good run of 5 or 6 games in a row here. Alrighty, on to the second rowers. On the first edge, we've got Ford here against Lemueli. I don't know too much about Lemueli, to be honest. Only have seen a couple of his games for the Dolphins, but size-wise, he's a pretty big boy. Not dissimilar from Ford. They're both, not massively dynamic runners, but they're both quick when they get a bit of a break on. We saw that chase from Ford on the weekend. Going 80 metres to try and run down the Broncos winger. So you know he's got pace. 10 games versus 12. Average running of 93 versus 96. Okay, tackle efficiency, we've got 88.1 for Ford there versus 91.4 for Lemueli. Not a lot in it. I think Ford's has improved slightly. It was actually a little bit lower down in the 80s, but coming up a little bit there. Line breaks of 5 versus 6. Tackle breaks 23. Ford leading the way there versus 17 and 2 tries apiece. Like I said, similar players, both playing big minutes. My biggest question mark here is can Ford get through a game without giving away an error or a silly penalty? Interestingly on that, I had a feeling like he was actually the worst in the team for the Warriors about giving away penalties and the errors, and actually he's not. He's about 4th in both stats, but I think it's the time that he gives them away and the places on the field he does it are very far from ideal. So hopefully he steps that one up and has a really big game like he started off the season back against the Knights in the first couple of rounds there when everyone was all over him. So, pretty even matchup for me, hard to call. Nia Cordia against Bromwich. Another couple of solid international boys here. 10 games versus 11 games there. Average running meters 99 versus 95. 92.8% tackle efficiency versus 94.6. Much of a muchness. 2 line breaks versus none. 18 tackle breaks versus 17, 1 try versus none. Very similar players, both workhorses, both get through a power of work. Generally, I should say, they are relatively low error type players. Grinders, get a lot of the dirty work done. We've seen a couple of silly penalties from Niokore over the past few weeks. I think it's been better actually against the Broncos than it was before the bye. So he seemed to run a lot more, get in the middle a lot more last week. As a result, he was over 100 average running meters when he's normally down. At some stages, he was around the 80s earlier on in the season, so he's picking up those numbers. I'd love for him to have a really, really big game this week and, again, have another statement from some of these players who've been a little bit more quieter than I would have expected. I had really high expectations of him coming in this year, and he's done a lot of really good stuff, but I'd just like to see that really big impact from him because, Bromwich is just going to grind it out. He's not going to give you an inch, so we've got to take it, smash our way through. So let's see how that one plays out, but it'll be pretty close. Then next up, Tohu Harris against Ray Stone. So Ray Stone, the wily old veteran. If you look purely at the numbers, 9 games versus 10. Run meters 130 versus 58. It's a fair indication that Ray Stone plays a bit off the bench. 94.8% tackle efficiency versus 89.4. Average tackles 39 versus 28. So this is where we're seeing the output from Tohu as well as the meters. Tackle break 17 versus 6, and neither of them got the try. They're both on the undie run or the nudie run at the moment. Fair to say that we expect Tohu to dominate this one. Ray Stone is a very, very solid veteran. He'll grind his way through there, but he won't be contributing to the attack on the same level. He won't be as pivotal to the Dolphins' outcome. But for us, we really need Tohu to step it up. I felt like he was really out of sync there with his runners last week in Brisbane. I don't know whether that was him or whether the runners were getting that wrong, but we've got to get that right. We've got to get that bloody attack polished and firing early on because we know that the Dolphins have got points in them. So for me, Tohu's got to step up and be man of the match. We haven't seen him put in a man of the match performance for a few weeks now. In fact, he hasn't even been in the top points, even though he has been doing all of the dirty work. So let's go, Tohu. You're the captain. Step up and shast the way up there in Auckland. Righty-ho. Then we get into the benches. So we've got Dylan Walker, Josh Curran, Mitch Barnett is back, and Bailey Sirenen versus Jared Wallace, Mark Nichols, Mason Teague, I think you pronounce that as, and Valence Tefare, the Kiwi boy. So we've got, what do we got there? We've got a very explosive, high-energy total utility, an edge-back rower, an edge-back rower / prop, and a multi-position man there who's kind of like an adapted back rower. They've got 2 genuine props, and Wallace and Nichols both have got really solid numbers, which actually exceed their starting props. So look to them to have a very big impact at the times AFB comes out. So luckily we've got Barnett to come on and sort of counter that this week. Teague's a 13, but he plays across the back row there. And Tefare, it's interesting having a centre there, but I guess the size of him, he thinks he's 108 kgs. Very big boy. He can cover the second row and the like, I guess, at a pinch. So I like the fact we've got Walker back. He is such an energy guy. We really missed him against the Broncos. I like his combination of energy with Curran and having the mongrel finally back of Mitch Barnett. We're so happy to see him come back. I was really worried there for a while with the rumours that he might not even be able to walk properly, much less play. But he seems to be back to full fitness, medically cleared. So let's pray he stays safe and hope he gets back to that form, because I went back and watched him play that Knights game, and man, he made such a big effort. Very hard man, hits very hard, never stops running. So Ciro, he had probably his best game, I guess, off the bench for me. Definitely his best game in the hooking role in that last sort of 15 minutes in the weekend. His passing was actually outstanding. It's something I've always questioned. He's probably been doing a few extras on that. So I'm going to give this bench to us this time. I know they've got a couple of big props there, but I think it's a bit of a risk having the big fella Tefare on there. I know he has a big impact when he goes on, but who do you take off to bring a centre on? And we've just got those really high energy players, particularly in Curran and Walker, and a man who'll be hungry for 40 from back. What's he been out since? I think it's round 3 there. So nice to be able to give them the edge there. Great to be back in Auckland. It's looking like it's going to be a sunny day up there. I think it's an afternoon 5 o'clock kickoff. So boys, daylight football for the first few minutes anyway, before it gets dark at 5:30 I suppose. Was it saying there, 17 degrees, not looking too windy, so perfect conditions for footy, which is maybe not ideal, getting the guys coming from the Gold Coast, but hey, I'm expecting a sold out crowd there. The boys will be hungry for footy up there, having not had many games at home this year. Massive vocal crowd compared to what we had at Napier. I don't expect to see any Muppets running on the field. If they do, I'm sure the Mount Smart faithful will give them a nudge. This is, for me, a must-win game, quite frankly. If we don't win this game and the game against St George, we can quickly lose touch with the 8. We're sitting in the 8 at the moment, but if we lose those 4 points, all of a sudden we could find ourselves down around 13th. We win them both, and then go into another bye. We cement ourselves well and truly in the top 8 there, if not in the top 6. So, similarly though, the Dolphins will be looking to maintain their momentum. Wayne will have them up for it. I'm sure Webby will have something up his sleeve, but it's a pretty hard one to call. I wouldn't go be putting significant money on either team right now, but my heart's always behind the Warriors. I'd love to see them come out, and I've said everywhere, I want to see that season-defining 80-minute performance where our defense and our offense click for 80 minutes in one round, that we just show the world what our team is capable of. And if we do that, I'm sure we can take away the win. I'm sure we can grind it with them, but they've got points in them, so we're going to have to be very, very much on our game, particularly out on the edges, because that's where they score a lot of our tries, or their tries. So let's go the Warriors. 24-16 would be a nice score. Couple of scoring plays out, so I can sit back and enjoy the second half. Up the mighty Warriors, we're still all in. This is the Warriorholic. See you next time.